Well, welcome back. Thank you for staying with Morning Express. In case you're just joining us, good morning from wherever you're tuning in from. We're taking a look at some of the headlines that have featured prominently in today's dailies. The Standard and the Daily Nation on the front page going big with what was the Wiper NDC just yesterday. It's all to do with the Raila Kalonzo ties. Even as I quote Raila, barabara yetu itakutana huko mbele. So it seems it's impending. It's not a question of if, but when. You get? Anyway, let's reintroduce my panelists. Professor Noah Midamba joining us in studio, Ambassador Ken Vitisia as well. Asante sana for your patience. Right before the break, you had a burning thought, a burning issue perhaps, but even as you speak on it, is it high stakes for this One Kenya alliance? Is it a case of unite or perish? I know you mentioned they're not uniting to stop one person, but for the betterment of Kenya, that is. Is it unite or perish?
It is obvious. If ODM and OKA don't come together, they should prepare themselves to be in the opposition from 2022 to 2027. But secondly also, if they don't unite and OKA puts up a strong whatever in June 2022, there is a chance that any of them could finish either number 1 or 2, and we have a runoff. Perhaps that is another scenario, that OKA goes it alone. They choose, but they must move fast and tell Kenyans, this is the OKA presidential candidate. ODM goes it alone with Raila and his, maybe there's another alliance is making up. UDA goes it alone. I doubt any of them can get the 50+1. Then, after that, we can sit and talk that 1 and 2, they go into the runoff. Number 3, whoever it is, whether it is Raila, Ruto, or OKA, can then play as the kingmaker. That's another option.
But what's likely to happen? I think we're painting the ideal scenario. What's really likely to happen? Should we see OKA go all the way till August 2022 without folding or without welcoming Raila Odinga into their foray? Because that seems to be speculative. We have a Jubilee Party that has a working relationship with most of these parties within One Kenya Alliance, including Raila Odinga's ODM.
Jubilee now is the trump card in all this. How Jubilee will play their card. I don't think Jubilee would want to have egg on their face that they supported ODM and then ODM did not do as expected. So Jubilee, I'm sure they are putting a lot of pressure on OKA not to go it alone. But then we are saying, you know, I'm a member of OKA now from yesterday.
Yes.
We are saying, let ODM come, let the dowry negotiations be open. Let us sit down and we look for the strongest suitor who we can put forward the economic agenda. Prof has said, let us look at the economic agenda. That's what this country needs. Bottom up, 6,000 per month and all that. It has all to do with the economy. You don't get the economy right, bottom up will not work. You don't get the economy right, you can't give people 6K. So how do we prioritize the economic agenda and who is the best person for that? That must be the criteria for selecting a principal, both between ODM and OKA.
So issue-based politics. We hope it takes the center stage. Prof, with your vast experience, because when he's talking about Jubilee not wanting an egg on the face, we're basically talking about the party leader, President Uhuru Kenyattas, trying to manage his succession come 2022. With the history, especially in Kenya, of presidents trying to manage their succession, it always hasn't gone their way. The public has the say at the end of the day. What say you? Because we saw Obama trying to manage his succession with, you know, Hillary Clinton. It didn't go his way as well.
That's correct. By the way, the decisions has to be made by Kenya. Parties can come together, parties can break up. That is politics. That is democracy. As you can see in the state of Israel, it takes a long time to play the chess game and settle down. What is most important thing is that Kenya must be able to look at the individuals involved and make very critical judgment about their track record. Where you coming from in the issue of corruption? Where you coming from in the issue of commitment for infrastructure development? Where you coming from in the issue of putting Kenya first so that we can move ahead as a country? And so the sand is going to actively sift from now on. And that is politics. There is nothing wrong. I am pleased to begin to watch issue-based politics. Yeah. As opposed to name-calling.
Exactly.
I don't like to hear the name of Kitendawili and all that kind of stuff.
Exactly.
It is absolutely meaningless.
Exactly.
And the people saying them are wasting our time. And therefore, focus on the issue-based. Coalition come together is important. But how are you going to put a team together that address the issue that Kenya is concerned? That's where I'm coming from. President Kenyatta is playing a very important role right now.
Exactly. Yeah.
His foreign visit and leadership is now coming very, very clear. He just visited South Africa the other day. Yeah. We need to normalize our relationship so that we can begin to trade. He went to Ethiopia. That is a really sensitive area right now. But we have a stake. Kenya has a stake. We have to focus on the issue of security with regard to Somalia, 24 hours.
Okay.
And all this other noise that's going on, when it is all settled, this is where Kenya is concerned.
All right, all right. We'll get to talk more about our diplomatic ties with South Africa following President Uhuru Kenyattas' two-day state visit in that particular country. But back to President Uhuru Kenyatta, it seems the deputy president is taking the battle to his doorstep. And allow me to quote some words he mentioned on the 23rd of November. It's an insult and contempt of the highest order for the president to act as if Jubilee doesn't have anyone else to lead it, that he had to bring the opposition to lead the government. And during his forays in Nakuru just yesterday, the deputy president equally mentioned, apart from prioritizing the Big Four agenda, he equally mentioned it's not right for Jubilee supporters. They were failed actually because of the handshake. It seems he's coming from a bitter point. Well, what say you about that?
I think the deputy president is crying. He's hurting because he knows that a big chunk of what would be his supporters will go the Uhuru way. Uhuru has a lot of influence, regardless of what Ruto says now. Uhuru will have a say in who becomes the president of this country. And this say will come through his influence within his Mount Kenya region. Mm-hmm. So that is why his deputy president has to cry. He's crying. When you see him, every day he has to lament and say, why is Uhuru not supporting me and supporting Raila? But
that was the agreement. You sort of understand where he's coming from, right?
But you know, political agreements in Kenya, my friend, they never hold. Just for the day. You just announce something. Even Ruto himself, my friend, when he announces that we are going to build 10 stadiums, what, those are, he's telling Kenyans what he will do, but he doesn't do it. And he knows it's a political statement. Raila is saying he'll give Kenyans 6K per month. That is a political statement. In Kenya, we make political statements that we don't mean. So when Uhuru said that Yako 10, Yangu Kumi, he was talking where? He was talking in Kalenjin land because he wanted the votes of the... the Rift Valley. That's what he wanted.
So, Prof, are these political statements or promises being handed over? Are Kenyans being taken for a ride from where you sit?
Historically, even when you look at American politics, President Kennedy did not support Johnson. And there was likely a possibility that if Kennedy did not die, he was not going to support Johnson to become the next president. So the issue is Uhuru has to pick and choose the kind of person he wants support as an individual. Then also as president, he has to protect his legacy. And he say, who is going to be best poised to help him protect his legacy? What we need as a Kenyan is what Nigerians are beginning to do. Release the president to play their role in their sphere of influence. Kenya is dominant in East Africa. We're dominant militarily. We're dominant economically. President of Kenya ought to be able to play a role in Burundi, like the ambassador just played, in Tanzania, in Somalia, in Ethiopia, and all our surrounding area.
Yeah.
And therefore, we ought to stop all this bickering, corruption, ethnicity, tribalism, such that the president can rise to a level where they will become preeminent people, like former President Obasanjo is now released to help the rest of Africa.
Okay.
And therefore, one of the things that as former Vice Chancellor, working with a lot of young people, is let's be careful how we use the language, how we address the institution. President is an institution.
Okay.
And you cannot call him, you cannot reduce the president to a lower person. And therefore, DP has to be careful with this language and how we use it.
Oh, interesting.
Yes.
And,
You see, from where I stand, in the last 4 years, after the handshake, this country has really moved. President Uhuru has had the chance, has had the pleasure of actually implementing his agenda in the last 5 years. He didn't have to worry about Raila calling for Mapambano or whatever in the streets of Nairobi. That handshake has really helped this country. And it's because of that handshake that President Uhuru is able to leave, for us, a legacy. If you look at the infrastructure across the country, look at the foreign, look at, we are in the Security Council, we have placed so many people in the international jobs because Uhuru has had the peace within himself and within the state to do what he wanted to do. That is the peace we wanted to continue as a legacy. But my worry is, as Uhuru wants to bring a legacy of a peaceful Kenya, do you think this country can have a peaceful election when we have two protagonists, obviously South Pole and North Pole, Raila versus Ruto? So he really needs to look at that. Will this really preserve his legacy? Because I believe it will not be peaceful. The elections already, you can see, Ruto versus Raila election campaign, my friend, will not be peaceful. And so that legacy, he really needs to look at it.
Yeah, peaceful elections is quite important. And perhaps it brings us to the next part of the conversation, the role of the judiciary, especially during election petitions. When you go to the presidential petitions, at times they go all the way to the Supreme Court, because that's the court instituted to listen to those petitions. But with the Chief Justice sitting in that multi-sectoral agency with various government institutions, what's your take on that? Do you cry foul, as UDA was, in terms of her participating in the planning for the general election, yet she's supposed to be the neutral arbiter when the time comes for petitions to be had?
You know, UDA, they're already crying foul even before the whistle is blown. I believe the Deputy President knows very well how important the role of state is, the role of the various arms of government are in the elections in Kenya. This has happened 2017, 2013, 2007. You cannot rule out the role of any of our branches of government in the electoral process in Kenya. Whether when the case goes to court, you can read the mood of the country, the mood of the state, where they want this thing to go. And this is what UDA perhaps is trying to preempt, to start saying, hey, we are seeing a problem here. Even if we lose and go to the Supreme Court, our case will be thrown out because already the Chief Justice is taking sides. So we should read that into what UDA is saying. But secondly, also, the Chief Justice has come out very clearly and stated that Kenya in totality involves the legislature, the executive, and the judiciary. And the judiciary cannot be aloof to what is happening in this country. The judiciary must question party nominations. The judiciary must question the preparedness of IBC, because these issues will come to the judiciary as petitions. So it's good for them to highlight these issues before these issues come to court. So they are assisting us to have a fair and free electoral process before it goes to them.
Okay.
So they're actually highlighting the issues that needs to be taken care of before they go to the judiciary.
So if the shoe was on the other foot, you wouldn't be complaining. If you were to say in the opposition as ANC party, you wouldn't be questioning the fact that the Chief Justice is part of that planning committee.
No, he has to be there. She has to be there because, as I said, it is important for the judiciary to start telling the IEBC, my friend, this is how we want this thing to be done.
Okay, okay. Prof, over to you. According to the Chief Justice, and we just had earlier, the JSE Act gives the Chief Justice the mandate to be the link between other government arms and the judiciary.
Exactly.
But in a heated political contest, especially in Kenya, would you blame UDA for crying suspect? Because the presidential petitions possibly might happen during the August 8th presidential elections, and they say it would be conflict of interest. You can't wear a neutral hat on one side, but on the other side, you helped prepare for the elections that party is contesting, you know?
I concur with Jesse, with what Ambassador just said. We have to respect our institutions. We cannot afford to be in a circle of every 5-year violence in Kenya and disruption. We have to prepare our institutions, and it is true that we are a democratic country, divided by 3 governments, the legislative, the judiciary, and the executive. Each play distinct role according to our constitution. So I don't see the Chief Justice role as negative in trying to join and participate in particular groups that will help heal and bring Kenya together. I don't see this as a negative. UDA folks have their right to say how they feel. True. But that does not determine the right or wrong in this case.
You brought up the 3 arms of government. Prof, we have a history of an overbearing executive, if you can put it that way. We've seen them influence some decisions in the parliamentary arm of government, in terms of legislature, and in terms of the judiciary, holding back on appointment of those 6 judges. Others might question it as it's overbearing. They should have followed protocol, filed a complaint to the JSE after they assume office. So with that in mind, you still don't see an issue?
You know, I've said this before.
Yeah.
Lee Kuan Yew wrote a letter before he died. And he wrote a letter to his people explaining his role and what he did. And Singapore moved from where we were in 1963 to be one of the best countries in the world today, economically and welfare of the people and everything. He had to do certain things that may not look at democratically right. He had to take certain action as the executive of the country. Now, the judgment the president has made is that these 6 people does not deserve to sit in the judiciary role. He has his reason. Those reasons may go to court, be open, and those people be judged. We have seen a number of judges that have really been questioned in terms of their credibility, you know, and what they do out there. Yeah. And this is all coming out. So we have to be sensitive as the country to make sure that the judiciary is clean. And anyone who is tainted does not deserve to be there. And so the president has a role as the executive in the country to call upon that kind of behavior, and so that the behavior be checked. And therefore, any political group can begin now shouting, preempting, in other words, Jesse, before we get to where we need to be. But if we start respecting our institution, we start respecting the legislature, and the legislature respect themselves. And then you go to judiciary, and judiciary play their role correctly, and the executive will not have any problem.
Okay.
in interfering with this.
Jesse, one of the reasons why I actually want to go to Parliament is because we really have a weak legislative arm of government. It is the legislatures, all these issues that are being raised, if the legislators put their foot down, if they brought things to Parliament to look at how the executive limits its powers. The powers of the executive are limited by the legislature. The judiciary is only an arbiter. But the legislative arm of government has been heavily weakened, has been heavily compromised, even in matters of corruption. Many of them have big logs in their eyes. They cannot look at the executive and point out issues of corruption because they know the next day DCI will be at their door saying, my friend, we have a file on you. So our legislative arm of government has been compromised, is weak, and that is why the judiciary has to come up. Even the judiciary is usurping the role of the legislature in questioning some of the things the executive is doing, but that should be the work of the legislature.
Okay, it's interesting, because at times it's usually a conundrum. It's either you toe the party lines in terms of voting for a certain legislative bill, or you go with your conscience.
But when you take the oath in Parliament, the oath is it's not to the party. It's to the people of Kenya.
Okay.
So when you become a member of Parliament, you take an oath to work for the people of Kenya, to ensure that the executive is under check, to ensure that funds that are allocated, it's the Parliament that allocates funds to the executive. You're like a man who buys a meat or a chicken and brings for your wife to cook, and then you don't even check how many parts have been brought for eating.
All right.
They do not check the use of funds which they have given to the executive to use.
Now, speaking of these three arms of government, let's talk about an office that falls under one of these arms, the DCI. And Prof, I'm sure you've seen the headlines in terms of the DCI boss, George Kenoti, being required to surrender himself for, is it a 4-month prison sentence at committee maximum prison due to contempt of court?
Yes.
On one side, others might argue it's the judiciary clapping back. On the other side, Kenoti sort of made a mistake according to the courts, and he should be held liable. Holding such a position, doesn't it compromise the decisions he will make thereafter? If he comes for, let's say me, right after this contempt of court issue was declared, I'd have a case in terms of why is he coming for me yet?
He has
it's supposed to be. So how do you look at it? And bearing in mind, he just got a senior position at Interpol just yesterday.
Again, I'm talking about issue of institutional integrity. The role Kenoti is doing is very, very important in our country. And from my perspective, he's been forthright and is going after his job and delivering for the people of Kenya. That is, you know, the Al Capone ran a place called Chicago for many years. They were gangsters. There were no rules in Chicago. They elected everybody, and all the legislature respond to them. And there was a man like Kenoti who said, we have to finish these folks. He went in front, he fought them, and he defeated them, and Chicago changed up to now. So the issue, recently there was a lot of pull and push between the executive and the judiciary. And it looked like to me, you know, I'm not a lawyer, but I have a lot of lawyer friends and judges friends. The issue is they seem to be going after the president. They seem to be an activist that going after the president for every decision the president make, they're going after him. What is going on? What are you hiding? Why don't you let this man do his job? The issue, it is very clear that he's not the controller of this weapon system, that somebody else is controlling the weapons. Why are you sending him to jail? When we need to be able, like I've said many times, to create a section of committee called economic crimes and take all these people and lock them. We need to find evidence. We need to lock these people up so that we can free our country to develop the way we need to.
But the rule of law is mandatory. At the end of the day, you mentioned they're neutral arbiters.
Yes.
Yeah.
You know, Jesse, I might be a politician now, but I've also been a diplomat. This gallery, this putting all these things in the paper, this war that is out in the gallery of the press between the judiciary and the executive needs to be avoided. I believe this is the time now Martha Koome, who is in charge of the judiciary now, really needs to rise up and we stop this as we go into the elections. Kenoti has not killed anybody. It's not a matter that we Kenyans really, it's just that he didn't give guns back to...
But a court...
No, I know. That's what I'm saying. Yeah. But the courts must also be sensitive. They must also be sensitive. They work for the people of Kenya. Courts don't work in isolation. They know where we are going. They know where we are coming from. So some of these people, Koome needs to call her people to order. Uhuru needs to call his people to order. Let these people sit down and say what is for the greater good of this country. Okay. You can just call Kenoti tomorrow and say, please, behind the closed doors, can you return these guns? And while this matter ends. Okay. But these people are fighting, and they are fighting in the press. And who is looking foolish? The public. It's wondering what is happening. Kenoti now cannot arrest me. I tell him, my friend, you have refused to be arrested. How can you arrest me? So it is also undermining our security.
So a symbiotic relationship between these arms of government.
They have to work together.
Okay, they shouldn't be seen to be fighting, quote unquote. Anyway, a lot more to discuss. Let's take a short break, gentlemen. Back at home, we'll be back with much more, including some of the statements made by politicians. Remember, they mentioned they're not campaigning, not just Deputy President William Ruto, but One Kenya Alliance chiefs as well. And I'm pretty sure they'll have a busy weekend, Friday, Saturday. We already know where they're going. But is it truly campaigns? Should IBC reel on them, crack the whip if they have the powers? Let's find out after the break. Stay with us.